Hello, and welcome to the SWRA podcast where aging, wellness, and wisdom intersect. I am Maggie Lazar. I am your host and delighted to have you on. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, I welcome you warmly. But if you are a returning listener, I also welcome you back. Thank you so much for being here with me. Today is about like aging and wellness. Those podcasts, the short five, even though they've extended into 5, 8 minutes, I really meant for them to be 5 minutes or less. But today, I want to address the topic of dementia as an aging, a concern as we age. Let's put it this way, right? I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were on opposite ends talking about how we learn as adults, and I was talking about the challenges of learning and retaining information, how much of a challenge it is. And, we did not see eye to eye on what the causes might be. And of course, the causes are complex, right? They're not linear. But one thing we cannot ignore is the fact that our bodies are aging and the brain is no different because the brain is part of the whole composition of the body. Now, you all know that with advances in technology, medicine, treatment protocol, awareness, the internet, social media, and the ease of sharing information, most countries around the world are doing better in managing chronic diseases that do creep up as you age because the body is aging. And of course, lifestyle and socioeconomic factors like poverty definitely play a heavy role in the development and management of chronic diseases. So dementia itself is not a disease. It's more of a behavior, right, that is caused by multiple factors. Some of them are physiologic and some are environmental. But one thing we know is that as the brain ages, of course, the brain being the computer, it does affect, memory and other things. But not the reason, dementia, when we give you a diagnosis of dementia, when your doctor or a healthcare practitioner says you have dementia, is after they've done a lot of investigating to show that whatever is happening up here in your brain is affecting your ability to care for yourself. This is when dementia becomes a problem because we all forget where we put our keys. We forget people's names. Oh boy, do I do that? I'm looking at someone on television and I'm like, I know this person, but I cannot remember the name. It is so frustrating. So I always say, well, I'm still here. As long as I remember who they are, their facial expression, the features, but I just can't remember the name. And it does come to me after a few seconds, sometimes minutes, sometimes the next day. But I always eventually remember. That is part of the aging process. There is a slowness of information traveling down the synapses to connect and say, okay, this is the information, right? But I'm not putting my shoes in the microwave. I am not walking out in the street forgetting where I am, which is when dementia becomes a problem. And when we talk about Alzheimer's, you can go to the Alzheimer's Association website and get a lot of data and statistics. Alzheimer's is just one form of dementia, and it, of course, the deadliest because there is no cure. But you may have dementia that stays mild for decades, right? Because the average time people live with the diagnosis is about 20 some years. And we have different types of Alzheimer's, right? Because, Lewy body, we have cardiovascular, you have all kinds of type of dementia. But my point today for this, and of course, we have millions of people affected. The economic burden is vast. We are living longer, which means our risk of developing dementia increases as we age. And the majority of people who are diagnosed are over age 75. When I'm 67, I'm heading there. And I know I have some memory thing that I forget people's names. I haven't forgotten where I put my keys. As I said, I don't get lost, so I'm still here, thank God. But what we cannot ignore is that this is something we have to think about. And I hate to say it, but in our community and as I go around talking to people, I was a dementia specialist. I can see some signs in some people. Not the fact that we forget where we put our keys, but that look and the forgetfulness that becomes significant when people are unable to manage their checkbook, when you forget to pay your bills, it becomes a problem. And we as a community of older people need to not stick our heads in the sand or pretend that it's not going to happen. We have to be alert. We have to be educated and we have to prepare for it. That's why we go and visit those homes to see what if I get in a position where I cannot be safe at home. And safety is a major concern in somebody with advanced dementia or Alzheimer's disease, right? So let's be educated, continue to learn about the disease, understand that if we're looking at living 80, 90 years old, about 50% of us will have some memory issues that requires supervision. So we cannot stick our head in the sand and say, oh, it won't happen to me. You don't know that. And as women, we are more at risk for dementia than the guys. Oh, yeah, well, we have babies, menopause. I'm like, it's just not fair. It's just not fair. Why do we have to go through all that? Well, no one's answering that question. So the best we can do is to be educated and prepared to stay ahead of what is coming. Because what we were saying in the US is that they are not ready for the onslaught of these old people living longer and 50% of them developing some kind of a mental capacity disorder that requires supervision. You don't want people walking down the street and getting hit by cars, forgetting where they're at, finding them in the woods. And even in the news here in Panama, they are talking about the number of people living longer and with memory issue that is increasing, and the country is not ready either. Nobody is ready for this because it's going to require a tremendous amount of coordination and resources. And we as expats, immigrants, we better be ahead of that storm. We got to stay ahead of it. So that's why we're just learning, gathering information, look at our resources, getting our monies together so we can pay for care because we will. We will. It's not an if, it's when. And if we personally aren't affected, we have our friends, our sisters who may need our help. So we have to be ready. Okay. That's another long one. I apologize, but this needed to be said. And I hope you go out there. I want you to be enlightened. I want you to have your mind open. Please do not close your mind and say, oh, it won't. Do not do that. Ignorance is not bliss, ever. All right? Especially as we age. Go out there, be a good human, be a good support for your sister who may be suffering with this disease because it is pretty devastating. All right? I'll talk to you tomorrow. Au revoir. À la prochaine. Bye.